The journey begins many, many years ago.
Robert Plant has been seen as a rock and roll god, the blonde-haired singer of Led Zeppelin, who has both voice and stage presence. Yet, beneath the exterior, he just wanted to provide for his family. Carmen Plant, 55 years of age, decided to break the silence and disclose a long-standing secret about her father's private life. Even though Plant failed to be a husband in the early years of his career, he did attempt to be a good father at home. He kept Carmen away from the outside world and what people had to say about her origins, many of which were not true and vile. It now brings to light the imperfections of a man who was all but portrayed as close to a superhero by fans and the media. It may be said with full certainty that the news is painful for members of Plant's immediate and direct family. The tale of a secret shame now unfolded to the world after so many years of being locked away in the dusty corners of family history. But Carmen's motives arguably stem from love, the wish to be recognized as a father's daughter before time moves on, and it is too late. However daring it is, hers is a leap into the historical truth. For fans of the legendary singer, this news provides excitement and closeness that have not been unlocked before. It reveals a side of weakness and imperfection below Plant's strong, passionate, and commanding figure. A lot can be said about the battle between independence and family, the trials of being a performer, and being away from home. The information gives subtlety to a black and white figure, making Robert Plant less of a man of dreams and more of an ordinary man whose life is not perfect but still filled with meaning. While some will take this news in as gossip because of the provocative titles that it entails, the better will look at it as an opportunity to accept even the superheroes as real people. In turn, we should respond with caution and give both the father and the daughter the respect they are due. All family secrets become burdensome with time. Now, this burden has been put down. Robert Plant's iconic legacy. This is not only due to the powerful voice of Robert Plant, but also something that resonates at the core of one's being. That distinctive howl, soaring above the grunts of hard rock act Led Zeppelin, has accompanied car journeys, house DJs, and life events for millions. Still, Plant, the man behind the pseudonym, conceals a tender, sensitive, and vulnerable side inspired by art and marred by misfortune. Born and raised in England's industrialized West Midlands, young Robert was far more likely to be seen spread out on his bedroom floor, surrounded by dusty American blues records than participating in any form of sport. The wails and growls from Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters touched something inside him. Plant heard those sounds and subconsciously made his distinctive voice known shortly. When Led Zeppelin launched in 1968 in London, Plant arrived with that voice and a burning desire to blow up musical conventions. From behind was guitarist Jimmy Page, bassist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham. Led Zeppelin created unprecedented rock sounds, folk, blues, Celtic, Indian, and more incorporated into original stadium-like anthems. While the world was enchanted by the music produced by Led Zeppelin, Plant ruled stages like a rock and roll shaman, half naked with unkempt golden hair. His voice rose to rapturous heights and fell to despair, expressing passion, loss, confusion, and release. Behind the scenes, the band found that success came at a cost when they experienced problems. Tough tours and negative reviews had personal effects, but nothing could have prepared Plant for the tragic death of his 5-year-old son, Carrick, in 1977 from a virus. Despondently, Plant came close to quitting music and only managed to get back on his feet after 3 years when bandmate Bonham passed on. Carried on from Zeppelin, Plant passed through grieving into rebirth. His constantly evolving solo career showed an artist searching for new ways to create sound and identity. He took home a Grammy in 2009 for a duet with bluegrass singer Alison Krausen. And the once arena rocker even found stillness, recently claiming to have spent the past 2 years studying transcendental meditation. Now 75, the lines on Plant's face perfectly align with his experience in the music industry. But within his eyes, the sparks, the creative fire, the yearning, the dream, the continual search for something in music are still there. In many ways, much has changed since the days of Led Zeppelin, but the passion for music of Led Zeppelin's singer remains the same. That zeal he developed as a young bluesman is still alive. The desire for inspiration never dies, and for many, fading away is not an option. The enigmatic personal life of Robert Plant. Despite being famous globally as the blonde-haired rock star of Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant has always been very private in his life over the years. He never revealed much of himself or his private life, wife, kids, and home life, which are shrouded in mystery that fans and the media have tried to solve for a long time. As for Zeppelin, he was busy introducing a new, weightier, less polished variety of rock and roll to the world. Plant, meanwhile, tried to escape into the countryside as often as he could. He purchased a small farmhouse in a remote area in Wales at the inception of the band's musical career as a place of relief from the grueling lifestyle of touring and recording. There, he could live a quiet life, raise cattle, and enjoy the comforts often denied to him with his family out of sight. Plant married Maureen Wilson in 1968 when his musical career began building momentum. They also had 3 children together, a daughter, Carmen Jane, a son, Carrick Pendragon, and a son, Logan Romero. He fought tooth and nail to shield them from the vices and the ordeals associated with stardom and wished to see his children as typical kids as possible. Unfortunately, Carrick died at the age of 5 of a viral illness in 1977, a loss that heartbroken Plant and affected his music. As the initial grief over the loss of Carrick subsided, Plant continued to value his time with his other children. He has publicly stated that Carmen is his best friend and the person he trusts most. As she grew up, he ensured she was grounded, not sending her to some fancy private schools like other girls her age, but to local schools in their hometown of Worcestershire. Despite getting close to rockalites, Carmen has noted that her childhood was quite mundane. Plant later was reported to have sired Jesse with his longtime girlfriend Maureen's sister Shirley Wilson during the 90s, although Plant has never spoken of this relationship. Skeptical about the media's interest in his and his wife's private life, he has attempted to let his children grow up without undue interference from the media, only mentioning their names fleetingly at best during interviews. The later years of Plant's family life are unclear, especially regarding his relationship with his wife Maureen. Carmen and Jesse are also associated with the music industry, but they do not get involved in the mess created by their father. They appear only occasionally by his side during functions, the only time Plant does speak about his kids. One can see the grief on his face that he still carries about the loss of his son Carrick and how much his children shaped his life and his art. While fans may never receive the biography they have always wanted, Plant's decision to encompass his family members and personal life says enough. For him, family is a refuge that has nothing to do with his public image and a life-saving force that remained the only constant in an extraordinary career built to chase his uncompromised, highly secretive vision of personal artistry. Who is Carmen Plant? Carmen was raised in that hybrid existence of being part rock star and part regular kid. Since she is the daughter of Led Zeppelin frontman Robert Plant, she grew up with a caring father who lavished affection on her. On the same note, Carmen saw the vortices of the turmoil just beyond the cocoon that her dad attempted to create for her and her siblings. She could see the fans, the crowds, the frantic travel, but that was in her father's other world. He was a simple man in his home, a father equally involved in his children's lives. But as Carmen grew a little older, she had a passion for the fabulous arts on her own. She realized she had got that creative gene from her father, but she decided not to go down Robert's way of creating history. Carmen continued with dancing, focusing on such forms as belly dancing, intrigued by world cultures. She engaged in dancing and choreography as a profession, getting paid for dancing and teaching while still keeping her own life off stay. Carmen was pleased every time her dad mentioned her dances in interviews, his tone full of fatherly boastfulness. She wanted her work to become a motivation for young girls as her father's music was for many people. Carmen experienced a tragedy in her childhood at the tender age of 9 years when her little brother, Carrick, passed on. It was almost as if the grief consumed her family till the present day, as they would continue to struggle with the loss. Her father pulled back from the public eye, seeking solace from his children, especially Carmen. The tenderness and the steadiness of their relations deepened even more. When Robert returned to music, most songs he recorded contained elements of sadness because Carrick was no longer around. Carmen would listen to such sad tunes and understand that her dad was singing for her, their family, and the fans. Carmen has been turning down invitations to relive details of her father's legendary life in the limelight for many years. She appreciates Robert's strong defense of their family's privacy. Lately, however, she has felt an emerging desire to share a glimpse behind the curtain, to reveal the man who cultivated gardens with her as a little girl and beamed at every dance recital. It is for the father who sheltered his children from the spotlights and the glitter rather than forcing them into it. However, if Carmen is to discuss her dad freely, it will be done in a very careful manner with a lot of considerations. Not for $1 or some juicy scandal, but to help the man she knows as a loving father. She wants to make people aware of his caring and responsibility, fun and peculiarities and words of wisdom, how he cared for each germination, the flowers in his gardens and the infant-like flowers in his tender children. Carmen also knows that when people look at Robert Plant, they see only a rock god. But she remembers the loving father who never hesitated to make her feel like the most special girl on the planet. It is this man she is dying to show, to bring out of obscurity. This man still refers to her as his little girl. The rumors and speculations over the years is one of the most famous musicians of the 1970s and 1980s. Due to his work with Led Zeppelin, were the deeper experiences of his life hidden from the public eye? And while success continued to build around Zeppelin, Plant officially became a father. His life played rock music against the backdrop of family existence. He protected his domestic life, aspiring to build relationships, but the demands of his job were a challenge. However, intimacy propelled Plant, as evidenced by his ability to write naked lyrics and his desire to establish musical relationships. Plant went through a lot of suffering in his life, especially when his young son Carrick succumbed to illness. It was this pain that was etched in my mind without uttering a word. In his honor, he has contributed to creating a charitable foundation that supports needy children in all parts of the world. Having lost his wife in a divorce few could understand, he turned his grief into helping youths in need. A desire to be close to the origins of rock and roll brought Plant back to the English countryside he visited when he was not on tour. He yearned for community, genealogy, and the rural countryside of his childhood. Even though reservations about fame still remained, he struggled with loneliness inherent to arena tours and constant praise. Sometimes he was overwhelmed with the image of a macho man, yearning for the part of him that very few people saw, kind, family-oriented, traditional. While Led Zeppelin began to disintegrate, Plant was released into the world and burdened. He wandered around until he established his identity as a solo artist. At last he was free to make music for himself, and in so doing, not only blended together countless genres but also showcased inventiveness hinted at previously. It became deeply, painfully, intimately so, therapy manifested for himself and the viewers. Plant still has the urge to travel, his curiosity guiding him through other musical paths. He is surrounded by people who, like him, have a hunger for knowledge and exploration. Despite the rock god epithet attached to him, his creativity is born out of happiness, playfulness, and an elder statesman unburdened by pressure. Today, the bravado and machismo that defined Led Zeppelin seem quite distant. The era when Plant, the husband and the father, was applauded and condemned for the sexual escapades of his band, Led Zeppelin, is long gone. She is no longer simply a memory that he bears in his bosom. His family lives through life cycles, marriages, births, deaths, and the emotional identification that comes with membership in the Crusader. Years pass, and Plant starts being less careful. He discusses ex-band members and recounts his exploits in words and music, guiding young musicians to lesser-known sources. The barriers that used to protect him from prying eyes now appear as flimsy as a picket fence that is porous. Though he continues to shun tabloids and gossip, he teases fans with glimpses of the husband, friend, and father he is apart from music. Plant, who is now in his 8th decade, is still passionate about exploration. His prolificacy is not owed to the necessity of creating performances, but rather enjoyment of the process. But the world changes and one thing remains: music, which guides him and gives direction to people. For a few years in the middle part of the 20th century, he made millions of people happy as a rock star. However, as one chapter is complete, the next chapter finds him striking out into fresh, creative territory with those he loves, where the fuel is family and happiness is found on the journey. A life in the limelight. The cost of fame. Carmen's childhood was in the weird reality of a rock star's daughter. Although she was pampered and provided with everything she desired and needed, her life was also distant both in space and in spirit from her legendary father. While Robert Plant traveled the globe with one of the most powerful bands of all time, Led Zeppelin, Carmen and her siblings were frequently placed in the care of others. Growing up, Carmen had a father who was worshipped as the golden boy on stage but could never attend school plays or birthday parties. She got to see how stressful the price of fame is on him, but sadly, this was only the case when tragedy struck. It may be noted that the baby brother of Carmen Carac died when Carmen was only 10 years of age. The family's raw pain was now for everyone to bear. As her father was sailing in his purgatory, young Carmen realized that one's privacy is not inviolable if one is famous. Like her father, Carmen watched fame from the inside and felt the sting of gossip, deception, and the relentless curiosity of the press. While the reporters debated how wild Led Zeppelin was, Carmen got the first inkling that everybody was an outsider observing her family, not a part of it. The lifestyle that came with her father's wealth meant she could travel to exotic locations and access privileged areas. But it also came with a lot of attention from the outside world and a sense of detachment every time her father returned home from his tours. His stay was mostly a brief one. Carmen testified to a man pursuing creativity at the expense of his soul, as illustrated by Orson Welles. She saw him being gradually devoured by the monster that is the fame. The whirlwind lifestyle that fueled the creation of Led Zeppelin mythology had a detrimental effect on his family, who stayed home. To escape the whirl of her father's fame, Carmen gradually distanced herself as she got older and developed her personality. She found out that on the list of her strengths, her passion was not music but dance. Thus, while dedicating her entire life to this craft, she distanced herself from the media spotlight that pursued her family. Carmen's decision to step down from fame appeared to reestablish a missing aspect of herself. Her father, too, was in the process of learning bitter lessons. Just as drugs and the rock and roll lifestyle fogged Robert Plant's vision, he was able to gain some clarity and see how his absence and loss had affected his oldest daughter over the years. Their relationship is today a mere scar tissue, a connection that will always bear the mark of Led Zeppelin's swinging 70s era. Carmen Plant, however, discovered her purpose in life by letting fame stay on the periphery. Regardless of how many miles she gets herself away from her father's influence, the past is always present in her life. She will always be the girl who surfed those strange waves of a rock star's chaotic wake, being paid and punished for every action. The moment of revelation, what Carmen finally admitted. This came to light when Carmen Plant, the daughter of the now legendary Robert Plant, decided to spill the beans about him. Although the public only saw the rock icon mourning the death of his young son Carac, the emotional turmoil affected the Plant family. According to Carmen's account, her father took the idea of quitting music and focusing on healing very seriously. This revelation made Robert Plant more relatable to his fans in a way many did not anticipate. The wailing rock star, considered almost superhuman as he performed on stage, was actually a man who fought the same battles of life as anyone else did. The harshest struggle had to do with how to handle fame's intrusive light, while also dealing with loss. Carmen's evidence-based assertion is that no matter how hard Robert tried to protect his family from touring and media, the two intruded into their home and brought stress. She referred to this period as an emotional one where she was stuck between a personal father and a public figure. Nonetheless, Carmen quickly reminded everybody that amid these turbulences, she and Robert had been lifelong partners in love and respect. She told them that despite his erratic attendance at work, his support was always reassuring. Later in their development, Carmen understands the implications of her father's having to make the necessary sacrifices for family and work. Where the rumor mills may have expected tales of scandalous affairs, Carmen has revealed the more wholesome account of Plant with his flaws and virtues. She proves the man is equal to the myth, while describing how he secretly suffered as much for love and grief as anyone. Thus, Carmen's openness lets the fans gain an important insight into what it is like to grow up as a daughter of a rock star. In contrast to the razzmatazz, she experienced loneliness and emotional turmoil, which other people did not take time to notice. However, now the public can see the real person behind the mask of Robert Plant and follow how the real man, suffering from personal tragedy, performs on stage. Instead of exaggerating what the legend had in store, Carmen added details that made it more real. What was revealed was a complex and heart-wrenching portrait of her father as a man who, despite all his accomplishments and achievements, is tethered by family responsibilities and struggles with great life challenges in private. Given that Robert Plant has been in the spotlight for half a century, his daughter's narrative was a brief glimpse behind the curtain into the strong and loving man who is a father to his family no matter all the rock and roll glory. The emotional impact, father-daughter reflections. When Carmen Plant decided to share her relations with her father, the legendary Robert Plant, it revealed that even such an exceptional family is not sheltered from great popularity and basic instincts. She was being truthful about feelings of love and estrangement that marked the relationship through the years. The most poignant story was Carmen's account of how the death of her little brother Karak when she was a child affected the family. This source also depicted the deep affection that separated them as young Carmen yearned for his console merely because he was a father. But Robert escaped the affectionate embrace of his father and the real world through his music and tours. She confesses that, at times, she felt that his love was only on and off during this time when she required it most. However, Carmen also described many instances of Robert trying to foster intimacy, such as phoning her from his car or stopping by her house for a short time between gigs. These acts portrayed his desire to sustain their father-daughter relationship regardless of the distance and time between them. She thus realized that this kind of pull and push behavior was the only way he was trying to spare her the darker aspects of his childhood. As a child, Carmen could not grasp the layers of pressure on her dad after not only having to process his son's death but also the toxic fame and resulting public shaming that consumed Echo. She splendidly opened herself up to more acceptance of these latent human failures as she aged. Carmen described her childhood and teenage perception of the contrast between the charismatic man her father was on stage and the fragile man behind the curtain. Her naive nature made him believe that moments of sorrow or fatigue were signs of a serious ailment. Eventually, she emerged beautifully to grasp these apparently antithetical aspects as part of the splendid tapestry of the man. In particular, Carmen realizes that her father's love for his family is expressed in his protectiveness and desire to spare his kids from the unhealthy desire for attention. Now, she knows what a tough price he paid for such a spirited man to give up his occasional adventures so his children could have somewhat normal lives. Clearly, instead of the neglect she had anticipated, Carmen can discern rich veins of love and care even in her dad's wrongdoing. The nice change Carmen has become a source of strength and guidance as she grows into her womanhood while her father remains a lost man is hilarious. How gratifying for the girl's earlier unfulfilled desires to now heal by being able to mother the man who gave her life. She is the compassionate listener, the non-judgmental friend, as they transition to a balanced exchange, and Robert can let go of the impossible ideal of the invulnerable savior. It is touching that even the superstars, with all their achievements, have fears and doubts they try to hide from everyone. Carmen tells us that even the largest celebrity within us has its secret corners that merely yearn to be called into existence by the echoes capable of making them feel worthy. Their transformation is depicted in her musings, pointing to the likelihood that every family can find redemption when sustained by love-inspired compassion. How this changes Robert Plant's legacy. Until recently, Robert Plant was the utterly rock and roll leading man, the golden boy of Led Zeppelin with the enigmatic voice that sent fans soaring on the wings of their imaginary electric guitars. His persona was that of an invulnerable, or rather superhero-esque figure. However, the myth surrounding him loses its steam, especially when his daughter Carmen feels comfortable enough to take the world behind the curtain and reveal the man behind the stage, a man named Plant, who was a father who lost his wife and child most brutally. It is only now possible to establish that the loss of his son Karak was the traumatic event that defined Plant's career and view of life from that point on. So much for the cocky golden god. Plant was a broken father in search of purpose. There was no more the oversized hero. The new knowledge of Plant's hidden turmoil clears up mysteries fans focused on earlier, such as why he almost quit music after Led Zeppelin. Torn between the happiness of performing and the agony of music. The extent of his sorrow explained why his post-Zeppelin ventures avoided emulating the band's powerful roar and went in a different direction. It was only later that I realized that Plant's evolution as an artist tracked his personal recovery process. Similarly, Carmen also provided small but significant aspects of Plant as a loving single father struggling to care for his child, which made him more relatable. While the fast-paced world of music stardom consumed his time, He relished every spare moment he could spend on Carmen's swimming meets and school dramas. The moment when Plant was shown encouraging his daughter during the race showed Plant's side, which was very different from the hard rock star he was known to be. While it was a sad loss, the death of his son arriving just when Plant was enjoying the heights of his career stardom and reckless lifestyle also grounded Plant. It was unimaginable pain that made him a close partner with millions of parents who suffered a life-shattering tragedy. It more than delivered what it promised, a brutal testament that even for a man as rich and famous as Plant, life's slings and arrows could hit home as hard as for anyone else. At last, the newly gained empathetic awareness of Plant's concealed ordeals shed light on the melancholy that the audience observed in his subsequent performances. Thus, by allowing the world to see the man behind the musician, Carmen helped grow Plant's legacy as a musician and person. Without his armor, Plant today is viewed as a man of greater depth and vulnerability. Instead of diminishing the myth of Plant as the golden god, the brief hints of his private suffering served to underscore his accomplishments. That this man, who had lost his daughter, could carry on and develop as an artist required great courage and personal resources. Suffering did not kill him. It enriched his imagination. That he was bold enough to unveil deep-seated and hitherto unknown wounds was encouraging. Thus, the show proved that Carmen's knowledge enhanced rather than reduced her father's rock god status. This means fans can now get to know the real Plant, the man behind the icon, and appreciate him even more as he continues to fearlessly make music to this date. The pullback of the curtain of Oz unveiled Plant's final triumph. His heart belongs to man as much as that ethereal voice immortalized. Fan reactions and the media frenzy? Recently, Carmen Plant, the daughter of the much-celebrated Robert Plant, came out in public to reveal her father's private battles. This unleashed sympathy from fans across the globe. For many years, the vocalist of the legendary Led Zeppelin was almost a cartoon character, a tall man with blonde hair and an extraordinary voice. However, in his daughter's confessions, many gray areas have painted the black and white image of his character. Carmen's perspective gave the fans a sneak peek into Plant's life, not as a rock legend, but as a man who lost his only son to an accident when the boy was just 5 years old. The tragic and unexpected loss of Carrack to a stomach virus in 1977 devastated Plant, who was on tour in another country at the time. According to Carmen, the death of his only son left an open wound that Plant has not had time to heal from to date. He still has Carrack's phone number saved in his cell phone 45 years later. Because of such rawness, fans have seen Plant in a new light. In its place stands a profoundly broken family man who never ceased to privately yearn. One fan posted, "It makes his music so much more emotional and heartfelt knowing what sadness he was dealing with." The media also has not shied away from this ballad of long seclusion and the heart-ache that comes with it. While some outlets reduce Plant's story to that of a cautionary tale of the dark side of the glamorous life of musicians on the road to stardom, others use it as a lens through which to explore grief and mourning and the role of men in that process. Many journalists pay attention to the fact that Plant succeeded in becoming an entertainer who could perform for millions of viewers at night while he was still devastated from within. Some few attempt to psychoanalyze Plant, speculating if he directed his sorrow into his powerful screaming voice. Some papers border on sensationalism with titles such as Led Zeppelin's Secret Sorrow and Rock God's Hidden Hell, but overall, Plant is depicted with respect, and the tragedy is portrayed as being relatable to everybody, especially parents. In fan communities, however, empathy is coupled with a fresh appreciation for the rocker's strength. His supporters were shocked at how Plant continued to perform for the stadiums of people with broken hearts. They were amazed that his deep sorrow did not destroy his imagination and desire to create. Only 3 years after Carrack's death, Led Zeppelin released In Through the Outdoor, which featured some of the most emotional vocals from Plant. Of course, this glimpse behind the curtain does not portray a cold, pompous rock star, but a sensitive man, sweetening Plant to the fans even further. By sharing such a personal loss, Carmen Plant has given the world clarity on the vision of her dad and, in so doing, softened the focus to reveal both his creative brilliance and his humanity, a new understanding of Robert Plant. The man in the leopard skin behind the microphone, the rock god that helped define a generation, was a man who grieved the loss of his 5-year-old son. Sadly, 2 years later, in 1977, Carrack died of a stomach virus. This left Plant devastated, and he was to experience a great personal loss, which was to influence his life and music. Carmen dared to tell everyone the truth, and Plant escaped from his family because he could not stand the loss of his dear boy and the tragedy that had happened. A man who used to be cheerful, loving, and physically engaging became cold and disconnected. Nonetheless, Plant constantly reported that he was depressed and distant during the production of Led Zeppelin, the loss lingering. This heartbreaking revelation augments our understanding of Plant's and the human being behind this celebrity. Stark, the unmasking of the rock legend, was the wrenching loss of his son that made him vulnerable. Of course, as Carmen thinks compassionately, Plant was just a father, so devastated by the loss of his child. What one saw as evident arrogance and confidence was internal struggle and anxiety. Carmen's thoughts are important to remember, not to dehumanize people like Plant as being unapproachable. His personal life was catastrophic and full of suffering, despite being the most famous musician of his time. It was evident throughout his life, probably influencing touching later songs about the deceased. We now see the subtlety and the pain behind his artistic productions. The once enigmatic rock god is a new age emotional figure, his detachment a sign of mourning. Carmen increases our empathy level by revealing the underlying personal suffering that Plant has been so private about. We now perceive him as a human being, not an object of ridicule or scorn. They merely enlighten the concerns that add hues to his work and make him such a touching figure. Although there is no turning back from Carrick's untimely death, Carmen's courageous act of telling the truth helps to restore humanity to her father. He is not only another rock star who burned out and faded away. We now know the reservoir of grief that remained in his psyche for a long time, making us marvel at his tenacity all over again. The newly humanized Plant seems within reach, a sorrowful father who channeled his sorrow into his revolutionary paintings.